All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pistolka, and I'm excited for our guest today because I've got none other than Phil Johnson from Master of Business Leadership, and we're going to be talking about developing emotional intelligence today. Phil, glad to have you.
Thanks, Damon. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, we're gonna dive into something today that I think is very important, and you're gonna tell us even more about it. Hopefully, that'll really help. So, Phil, let's do this. We always like to start the show off with letting our guests talk about their background and how they got into what they're doing today. So, share that with us if you can.
Sure. So I'm 68 now, and I had the good fortune of being born with dyslexia. And back in those days, there was no such thing as dyslexia, ADD, or ADHD. Um, but because my brain doesn't work the way most people's brains work, it forced me to do a lot of what I now refer to as emotional labor. It kind of yanked me out of my comfort zone. Um, and the fear and the anxiety that that created, and the emotional labor required to move through that fear, um, helped me to develop a greater awareness of what's going on in me and around me. It helped me to develop my emotional intelligence. So that's the track I've really been on all my life.
Okay. So when did you? I mean, what really triggered it? And you just said, "I want to study emotional intelligence." I mean, because that's I mean, just as a topic, I'm thinking in my mind, how did you just pick that, or did you other things, and then you came into
Yeah,
this?
yeah. It was the death of 1 month after the death of my mother in December of 1967. In January of 1968, I decided I wanted to do this work before it was even called emotional intelligence. Um, and it really changed my trajectory dramatically in a positive way. Um, and I kind of became this super overachiever. Um, I did well in university and in my corporate career. I spent 20 years in the semiconductor industry after studying electrical engineering. I was traveling about 60,000 miles a year throughout North America and the Pacific Rim. And by 1990, I had all the toys. Um, but I was disappointed at the quality of leadership and generally speaking. And then I kind of forgotten the reason I was doing what I was doing. It goes back to the promise I made to myself in January 1968. And I decided to leave corporate America. Uh, I turned down two vice presidential roles to begin doing what I've been doing uh, for the last 22 years as an executive coach. So I've coached companies and executives all over the world, helping them to succeed by developing their emotional intelligence. I've helped
Okay.
to generate about $1.5 billion in revenue and help people to advance in their careers.
Yeah, that's a billion with a B, not with a M.
That's that's 1,000 million.
Yep, yep. That's awesome. And and still, so for myself and listeners, what is emotional intelligence so we understand what you're talking about here?
Yeah, a very simple explanation to a very complicated process is it's the ability to move outside of your comfort zone through the anxiety that that triggers in us towards um, a desired result we want to achieve. That's how you develop your emotional intelligence.
And can you say that again? You're moving outside of your comfort zone.
You have to have an emotion. Let me back up for a second. Whenever we take an action that moves us outside of our comfort zone, there's a part of our brain, our old lizard brain called the amygdala, that for hundreds of millions of years has been trying to keep us safe and alive by making sure we never leave the comfort of our cave. And if we do, it tries to force us back into our comfort zone by secreting a hormone into our bloodstream called cortisol. And that causes the executive center of our brain to shut off. And we often say and do things we later regret. Psychologists refer to that as an amygdala hijack.
Okay.
People lash out, some people run away, some people freeze like a deer in the headlights. And when that happens in conflict situations, it can cause people to die. And when it happens in business or personal situations, relationships die, we burn trust. So as an analogy, if you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a big brother or a big sister to quiet that amygdala response down to change and better enable us to feel the fear and anxiety that change triggers in us and move through it towards what we're trying to achieve, as opposed to allowing that fear to keep us stuck in our comfort zones.
Ah, great. Now I
Yes.
understand a little better.
Okay.
Now I understand a little better because you're trying to the emotional intelligence helps us move through that uncomfortable or outside of our comfort zone because we know that is what we need to do to achieve the goal we're trying to do. And the fact of being able to move out of that comfort zone is where you really get benefit from developing your emotional intelligence.
Yep.
Huh.
And it's incredibly difficult. Um,
Oh yeah.
and that's only one of three primary sources of resistance we have to change. Uh, and so the development of our emotional intelligence, more and more companies are hiring, developing, and promoting emotional intelligence because they have no choice. They're recognizing they have no choice. We're facing change is increasing at an exponential rate. We're facing a tsunami of change globally, and we have a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change. So the only way we can navigate our way through the fear and anxiety that change triggers in us, all of us, is the development of our emotional intelligence. And if you want, I don't know if this is getting us off topic or not, but I can give you an example of a company that's currently doing over $1 trillion a year in sales. That's 1,000 billion.
Yeah.
And their primary hiring focus is on emotional intelligence.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
That's something to be
you,
able to
you,
think about what you're
you
doing
want to
there.
know who the company is?
Let's hear it.
Apple.
Yeah.
That's
I
why
was,
when you walk into an Apple store, that energy you feel is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. They're not trying to sell you anything. They want to try and understand your pain and, if possible, offer a solution to your pain. Whether you buy anything or not is secondary to their desire to want to serve you. They want you to have a great experience, and maybe you'll tell your friends and they'll tell their friends. And if you think about it, that energy is a very different energy from the stores surrounding it. That energy is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. And because of the accelerating rate of global change we're experiencing, um, emotional intelligence represents the future of organizational development. It isn't a solution to the tsunami of change we're facing, it's the only solution.
yeah, because it does, as you said, change coming faster. We got our old brain trying to protect us, keeping us behind unless we've developed this emotional intelligence that allows us to move past our comfort.
Let me give you another example. According to Gallup, the current level of employee engagement worldwide is around 13%. Low
Okay.
levels of employee engagement are costing the US economy over $1 trillion a year. And there's almost a one-to-one correlation between the level of employee engagement and the level of customer engagement. So if your employees don't feel engaged, neither do your customers. And that's a direct reflection of the toxic work environments people are facing because of an unwillingness to change. They don't feel safe. They don't feel safe to take risks. See, if you're not willing to change yourself, which most people aren't, because of the biological and sociological resistance we have to change, the only alternative we have is to try and use position-based power to control and manipulate others to get them to change because we're unwilling to change. And that's the way we've been operating for a very, very long time. That's why there's such a low level of employee engagement. And that's why over 80% of M&A ventures fail. Lack of trust. So the development of emotional intelligence is a root cause solution to all drama, chaos, and conflict. And by developing your emotional intelligence, you may want to write this one down. The development of your emotional intelligence will enable you to outcare your competition. And that's what Apple has proven. The development of emotion. If Apple wanted to get into banking and they know nothing about banking,
Yep.
they'd have 10 million depositors overnight. Even though people realize that they know, if Apple decides to get into it, people are going to trust them that they'll figure it out. And because of the accelerating rate of global change, there's something called the trust economy that's developed, that's currently estimated at over $10 trillion a year. It's growing much faster than the traditional economy because people can't keep up. Things are happening so fast that they're being forced to rely more and more on their network of trusted advisors, so that your trustability, your network as an individual or organization of people that trust you is the most valuable asset you have. And the key to demonstrating trustability is emotional intelligence.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and you make a great point. Apple could get into whatever. They could build a car, and there's people they would buy the cars not even knowing the reliability or anything, just because it's Apple.
Let me give you another piece of information. Because humanity has evolved from tribes, from herds, we've had to develop the ability to sense whether somebody's trying to help us or eat us. So that we have these specialized brain cells in our prefrontal cortex that brain scientists call mirror neurons. You're able to sense, that's why you're able to sense whether somebody's trying to help you or hurt you. That's why when you walk into a room, you're able to sense the energy in the room. That's why when you're having a conversation with somebody, you're able to sense whether they're trying to help you or hurt you. So the point is that you can't fake being authentic. You can't fake being real. So as you develop your emotional intelligence, people become more trusting around you, and you become a more inspirational leader. It also raises your level of consciousness about what's going on in you and around you. See, we're only actually conscious about 3 to 5% of the time. The rest of the time, we're relying on our habits to determine our behavior and our results. And so the habits associated with developing your emotional intelligence have been proven to generate both career, personal, and corporate success. all over the world.
Yeah. Wow. That's it. When we talked before and now talking again, it's amazing how you've um how you've come thought this through to the point of what the underlying root cause, right? Because when we think about why our brains doing what we do, and then into how that translates in us resisting change, having to get outside of our comfort zone, those kind of things, it's amazing because we don't we do this, we don't even realize we do it a lot of times, I'm sure.
Almost all the time.
And
Go ahead.
so when you look at emotional intelligence, now you help people, as we talked, the title says, developing emotional intelligence. So how do you really begin to develop your emotional intelligence?
Great question. And there's only one way to do that. You have to start out, you have to form an emotional connection to the vision of a desired result that motivates you to move outside of your comfort zone in pursuit of that result. Without that, without that emotional connection, you won't be willing to do the emotional labor that the development of emotional intelligence requires. You may want better results than you're currently getting, but
Yeah.
you won't get the results you want because your fear is controlling you. Your fear is controlling your behavior.
Yeah.
So it's always, see, there's only there's only two sources of motivation that will cause us to leave our comfort zone. One is pain, the other one is passion. And hardly anybody's connected with their passion. So for the most part, the initial motivation for people to do the work that change requires is pain. It's an urgent desire for better results than they're currently getting. And that's great because we can take that motivation and create remarkable results. But without that motivation, nothing changes.
Yeah. So you're saying in the initial onset, you try to use pain to help to start, and then passion take. Oh, I don't quite.
Yep.
So
Yep. So the primary first question I ask people is, what do you want? See, when somebody tells you what they want, they're also telling you what they don't have. And the bigger the gap between where they are versus where they want to be, the more motivated they are to look for a solution to close that gap. And without that motivation, change is impossible. So you need that motivation. You need that drive towards a desired result.
Yeah.
To create the change process. And as you're going through it, there's five primary outcomes that come from that. You develop your emotional, you begin the process of developing your emotional intelligence. You become a more inspirational leader. You raise your level of consciousness about what's going on in you and around you. You become freer from your ego-based fear. And you create career, personal, and corporate success. So all of those are benefits from doing the emotional labor required. That makes, and as you actually, so as you go through the MBL process, the motivation changes from a motivation based on fear to a motivation based on passion. It changes from trying to get away from something to trying to move towards something.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think ultimately the fear part of it has to subside someday, because you're seeing some success in what you're doing, and then you realize and you go, yeah, it's still uncomfortable, but I know I'm going to do this because I've seen the results from doing it. I know this is going to suck or whatever, going to make me feel bad for it, whatever. I always and I'm bad. I'm not bad, but I always like to relate things to athletics, because athletics is so easy. You know, nobody wants to train for a marathon, but to do a marathon, you got to train for a marathon. You go through hell to train to do something you really want to do. And yeah. Huh.
Let me give you an example of the difference between intellectual intelligence and emotional intelligence.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Think of your intellectual intelligence or your ability to do intellectual labor as somebody giving you $10,000 a day for 31 days. So at the end of 31 days, you've got $310,000. Now think of your emotional intelligence as somebody giving you a penny a day that doubles in value. So day one, you've got a penny. Day two, you've got 2 pennies. Day three, you've got 4 pennies. Day 31, you've got $10.7 million. Day 40, you've got over 5 billion. Day 50, you've got over 5 trillion. UC Berkeley did a 40-year study comparing intellectual intelligence with emotional intelligence. And they concluded that emotional intelligence was 400% more valuable in predicting success in business and in life than intellectual intelligence. You see, intellectual intelligence is genetic, it's fixed. If you have a high IQ, your parents had a high IQ, their parents had a high IQ, and you simply inherited those genes. But emotional intelligence is something that anybody can develop. It's not an intellectual process, it's an experiential process. So whereas not everybody can have 160 IQ, everybody can develop their emotional intelligence, and the ROI is massively greater than intellectual intelligence. See, our educational system has failed us, and our employment system has failed us because they focus primarily on our ability to do intellectual labor, and they've done little or nothing to develop our emotional intelligence. But because of the tsunami of change we're facing, the development of our emotional intelligence is a must-have skill to be able to navigate our way through the fear and anxiety that change triggers in us. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And we have a question here too, so I want to get this. Dr. M, should we have a formal defined emotional strategy evolved and implemented in an organization? That's a good question.
There is a methodology for organizational change, and there is a methodology for individual change. But you can't have organizational change without individual change first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this gets into a different topic area, well, a related topic area, and it has to do with energy physics, which I've been proving over the last 22 years. But to answer the question briefly, the more emotionally intelligent individuals there are in the organization, the less toxicity there is in the organization. And you reach a tipping point where the organization can begin to heal itself. But the focus needs to be on developing the emotional intelligence. Once about 20 to 25% of the people in the organization demonstrate emotional intelligence in their behavior, the organization begins to self-correct. And the drama, chaos, and conflict begins to reduce itself. The organization begins to heal itself. There's less toxicity. There's higher levels of engagement and trust. There's actually better results with less effort and more fun. So, but you can't change an organization. You can't change the culture without beginning with the individual.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I think
not
that's
a
a great,
it's not a top-down process. It's a bottom-up process.
yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And this is a great this from Paul Van Meter. A
Oh, yeah.
students don't generally go on to be the most successful.
Yep, you're right.
And that's so true. So true. You
Ever
know,
heard,
what
ever heard the phrase hired for IQ and experience and fired for lack of emotional intelligence? Let me
nope.
explain. Um, when we get scared, we run to our strength and away from our weakness. So if the way we've been getting brownie points um, in our life is based on our ability to do intellectual labor, based on our IQ, that's where we run to try and solve every problem. The old saying, well, all you've got's a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yes.
So people typically with high IQs have low levels of emotional intelligence because they haven't done the emotional labor required to develop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That
love
and it
I love the question, by the way.
yeah. Yeah. And so as you come back here again and in talking about this, and we're talking about I think this is so cool though that you've taken it down to the point of 25% of the people, if they're demonstrating reasonably good emotional intelligence, it starts to really allow the organization to self-heal and do some good things. So as you're doing this, then um when you go into organizations, because I'm assuming you're coaching individuals, but multiple individuals from an organization, what kind of process is this? If we're taking somebody through this, is this a year-long process that you like to in an organization? Is it a lifelong? Is it something that you start them on a path and you kind of have to? I mean, I'm just curious on that.
Yeah, the answer to your question, the answer to your questions is yes.
That's what I thought, but I had to ask. I had to ask.
The MBL program, the Master of Business Leadership program, is initially a 16-week program.
Yeah.
But there are organizations and executives I've been working with for over 13 years because the ROI keeps getting greater and greater and greater as you work towards mastery of the habits and micro skills in the program. So the
Mm-hmm.
ROI keeps getting greater and greater. And
Yeah.
if that's the case, why would you ever want to stop?
Yeah. 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 It's again, I take it back to athletics, but getting ourselves into shape. You don't want to get into shape and then stop working out. You want to continue to refine and get in a little better shape and a little better
See,
shape.
here's the thing. Here's the thing to keep in mind as well. Um, when focusing on our physical ability, we're fighting a losing battle
Yes.
because our bodies are wearing out over time. So we're putting in more and more effort for less of a return on investment. The opposite is true in developing our emotional intelligence. The ROI never gets less. The ROI continues to grow exponentially in value.
Yeah.
So it's the development of your emotional intelligence has the greatest ROI. It's greater than physical labor. It's greater than intellectual labor. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's the best investment you can make.
Well, and I can only imagine that it is, because if you get more and more comfortable with embracing where you're going to go and then doing what you need to go there without the hesitation, without the, wow, we can't do it because of that, the better you are, and the better you are communicating that and helping everyone feel that way. In an organization, it is it's the way that you can move mountains.
It's called enlightenment.
Ah,
It's you're right. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. It's incredible. It's interesting. So folks, people, executives that are going through the program, as they're going through the program, they're going, holy crap, this is amazing. This is remarkable. And I say, yes, I agree, it is. But is there anything I could have said to you in the beginning that could have prepared you for what you know now? And the answer they always say is no. There's nothing you could have told me that could have prepared me for what I know now. And see, that's the difference between knowing something intellectually and knowing something experientially. There's no book you can read. There's no conversation you can have. There's no video you can watch that's going to develop your emotional intelligence, because those are intellectual processes. The development of emotional intelligence is an experiential process. It's not an intellectual process. It's what you do, not what you think. As a matter of fact, what you do will change what you think. See, we're all telling ourselves a story to justify whatever we're doing or not doing. It's called a rational lie. And one of the things I say to people before I start coaching them is, I don't care what you think. I only care what you do. Because what you do, what you do will change what you think. What you think today is simply a reflection of what you've been doing or not doing. So if you want better results than you're currently getting, that has to change. Your actions have to change, and that will automatically change the story you're telling yourself. So what's the point in understanding what you think? You have to focus on what you do, and the thinking will automatically adjust.
yeah, that makes tremendous sense.
You have to act your way into better results.
Yeah.
Not think your way into better results.
Yeah, that's a great point. Act your way to better results.
Yep. And that requires you to leave your comfort zone and move through the anxiety that creates. You want to know the other two sources of resistance to change?
What are they?
One is biological as well. The other is sociological. The other biological source of resistance to have change is our existing habits. See, once we develop a habit, it's a neural network pathway in our brain that we develop through our actions. And when we practice something enough, there's a process called automaticity where it converts from being a conscious activity to an unconscious habit. So once we develop a habit, it's there forever. And although we can develop new habits at any age, those new habits are always going to be weaker than our old habits, called brain plasticity or neurogenesis, because there's a coating that goes around the neural network pathway called myelin. It's like an insulation layer, and it's thicker when we're younger than when we're older. So there's going to be an ongoing battle internally within us between our old and new habits for dominance. Even though the new habits can work better, there's going to be that ongoing struggle. So that's the second biological source of resistance we have to change. The third, sociological, is that people around us don't want us to change. Because if we change and start to get better results, maybe they're going to have to change, and that scares the hell out of them. So the best way to ensure they don't have to change is to make sure we fail. So they can say, look, I told you, now shut up and get your head down and come back into the herd with the rest of us. So even though, and this is really my point, that the development of our emotional intelligence guarantees career, personal, and corporate success, it's harder than hell to do. And if you don't have an emotional connection with the desired result that's greater than your fear, you won't be able to do it. You won't be able to do the emotional labor required. I had the very good fortune of being born with dyslexia. But I can tell you, if I hadn't been born with dyslexia, there's very little chance I'd be doing the work I'm doing today.
Mm-hmm.
So we
Yeah.
need the people I work with have to have an urgent desire for better results than they're currently getting. That motivates them to be willing to leave their comfort zone. And I can guide them through the process like a Sherpa, but I can't do the work for them. We all
Yeah.
have to do our own emotional labor.
Yeah. But you make one good point, and this is where I think that any change, there has to be desire and enough passion to put in the work, because
Ever hear the old saying? And I think this applies to act. I hear this regard to actors a lot. If somebody can talk you out of doing something, let them, because it wasn't that important to you anyhow. See, if you can be talked out of not pursuing your desired result, it simply means that it's not that important to you.
yeah.
When you can't be talked out of pursuing a desired result, that's the measure of the emotional connection you have to that desired result. And that's the fundamental starting point for change.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you can't be talked out of a desired result. Yeah.
I want to give you two examples.
Yeah.
Tommy Edison invented the light bulb. Took him 1,800 experiments. And somebody says, Jesus, Tommy, that's a lot of failure. He said, what do you mean? He said, I just learned 1,799 ways not to make a light bulb.
Yeah.
See, his focus was always on making a light bulb, and he didn't view those 1,799 experiments as failure. He looked at them as information. Same thing as Disney. Disney got turned down by over 2,000 banks before he was actually able to generate enough to generate enough funding to begin construction of Disney World. And he died before it was completed. And somebody at his funeral said, geez, isn't it too bad Walt never got a chance to see his dream come true? The guy said, well, he did. I mean, if he hadn't already seen it, then we wouldn't be seeing it. See, he had an emotional connection to a desired result that motivated him to keep moving forward and keep adjusting his presentation until he was able to get that funding to begin the construction. That's the importance of having that emotional connection that motivates us to leave our comfort zone and keep moving forward.
So do you think
that's the starting point?
Now when you say that, now trying to bring that into people we see around us today,
Yep.
do you think like an Elon Musk that just jumps out there and says, listen, we're going to create this company called SpaceX, and we're going to figure out how to land rockets that nobody's never done, and we don't even know how the hell we're going to do it? Is that the kind of thing?
Sure. Elon was 1 hour away from going bankrupt in Tesla.
Yeah.
He put his last $20 million into keeping the company afloat. So he was willing to risk everything financially. I mean, he was on the verge of an emotional breakdown.
Yep.
That's a pretty strong emotional connection to a desired result.
Yeah. Because it really is. And we're not talking about, when we talk about things, it's not like we're talking about bad things. It's just when you talk about that desired connection that you need to do what it takes to put the work in to do what you need to do. It could be making those last calls, taking that risk. It could be, pushing a little bit farther beyond you're going.
It could be making muffins.
Yeah.
Could be anything. Could be drawing with crayons. It's not what you do. It's how you do what you do that's most important. It's the degree of consciousness or presence that you demonstrate in the moment because the moment is all that exists. This moment is all that will ever exist. There will never be a future moment. There's no past moment. The only time we can take an action and generate a result is this moment. And how we show up in this moment determines our results.
Wow.
All there will ever be is this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And we spend most of our time trying to get out of this moment into some magical future moment that we think is better than this moment. So it reduces our consciousness and damages our results in this moment.
Yeah.
It's ego-based fear.
Hmm.
See, our ego never wants us to be in this moment. It wants us to be focused on some mystical, better future moment or some past moment. And so it's because it's easiest for our ego to use fear to keep us from moving outside of our comfort zone. Being able to be more present in this moment is the key to freedom from fear. It's the key to freedom from ego-based fear. See, our egos want us to feel superior to or inferior to others, but it never wants us to feel equal to others. And all of this, everything we've been talking about, is all related to energy physics. So what that means is that the results of doing this work are guaranteed. Mm-hmm. It's like when you flip on a light switch, the light switch doesn't think, well, am I going to turn on? It has to turn on, flow of electrons. It's the same thing with this. Because this is essentially energy physics, you cannot go through this process and do the work required and not succeed. It's impossible.
Yeah.
But having said that, I've outlined how challenging it is.
Yeah.
Both biologically and sociologically.
Yeah.
And that's why most people aren't willing to do it. And that's why we live in the world we live in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at, like you said, biologically, we have our habits that are fighting against us. And then you look at sociologically, I mean, how many times you hear about this, or you've got an idea that is what you should be doing, and you talk to somebody, say, are you sure you really
did you really want to lift your head up? You really want to put your hand up?
Yeah, you really want to do that? Are you sure you want to do? I mean, and they're doing it because, like you said, they want to. If it's someone that loves you, they may be doing it because they want to protect you, and it's using their own fears and judgments or against measuring against that idea. They don't have your frame of reference, nor do they have the passion to do what it takes to get there.
Nor do they want you to leave them behind.
Yes. Yeah, that's something. And when you talk about and this is something personally I've really come to terms with, is living in the present moment, experiencing that second, that moment, giving it your attention and doing it. And it is life-changing to understand and do that.
Write this down. Here's another saying for you, for your listeners. The person most present is most influential. The person most present is most influential. Here's another saying. Developing your emotional intelligence will enable you to outcarry your competition.
Yeah.
Apple's prove that.
Yeah.
Works pretty well.
Out carrying them. Yep.
Yep.
Well, and like you said, they've taken it. It is, and you see this in people that really have great products and services. Is they care about their customers' experience and that they're getting exactly what they need or want in that situation. And and if it's not, it's not. It's but they really want to work on that more than the product itself.
Yes. And let me give you another thing to consider. If somebody doesn't want to work with you, if they don't trust you, they'll find a way not to work with you, even if you have the best technology and the best pricing. Conversely, if they want to work with you, if they trust you, they'll find a way to work with you, even if you don't have the best technology or the best pricing. So
Mm-hmm.
trustability is the key. And the key to trustability is emotional intelligence.
That is 100%, because if they know, like, and trust you,
We have these
they
mirror neurons, these bullshit meters. You can't fake being authentic. So as you
Mhm.
develop your emotional intelligence, you lower your walls, you become less resistant, judgmental, and attached to outcome, which enables people to trust you, to be inspired by you, to want to be around you.
Hmm.
It's physics. I know, it's a lot.
Oh no, I love talking to you about this, and I'm trying to soak it in and try to ask intelligent questions, because honestly, I start to listen and I'm just like my mind is just trying to soak it in, because it is, you talk about these things and you go all the way back to, you need enough desire to drive the change to do what you need to do, and you talk about how Apple uses it, and you talk about how other people like Elon Musk and willing to want it so much they're going to go right to that edge.
Yep.
And how the other thing you talked about is the person most present is the most influential, and you go back to situations where you've been in those with rooms of people.
Yep.
And that person, you can see that person in the room, they're truly listening, they're trying to understand what is going on really at a deep level. They're not thinking about next week, they're not thinking about yesterday, they're thinking about today, and how am I here, and how am I going to be valuable in this situation, as valuable as I can be in here.
Pretty cool,
And
huh?
yeah, good stuff. And Phil, I always love talking to you. I love reading your stuff, because it is so thought provoking, and I believe 100% in the fact that your emotional intelligence really does it controls how far you're going to go and what you're going to be able to do.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I have one last quick question though,
Sure.
because we're kind of running out of time, but this is one that I really think that if we could answer from my mind is, why is it especially important now to have more emotional intelligence than any other time, with what we've got going on in the economy and COVID, all these other things? Why do you think it's even more important now to understand this and really?
Making money is easy. Generating revenue is easy. Career advancement is easy. Success in your business and personal life is easy. There's another big thing going on here. We're at a tipping point as a species on the planet. We're facing, some scientists estimated in this century we could experience roughly the equivalent of 20,000 years worth of change, or 200 centuries worth of change. Change is increasing at an exponential rate, and we've got a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change. We have to change our trajectory dramatically, because the way we're living today is unsustainable. There isn't a single other species on the planet that wouldn't be better off if we didn't exist. We are the virus on the planet. In relative terms, we've been on the planet for less than half of 1 second. And in that time, we've destroyed the climate. We're facing things like CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology, AI, other pandemics. Without the development of our emotional intelligence to deal with the fear and anxiety that triggers in us, I don't believe we have a chance of making it out of this century as a species. So the reason I'm having these conversations, the reason I'm trying to help people understand the value and importance of developing their emotional intelligence and betting on themselves to develop their emotional intelligence is because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
We need to change our trajectory dramatically in the next 10 to 20 years. And without the development of our emotional intelligence, that will be impossible. So you want to make more money? Easy. You want to advance in your career? Easy. You want to get better personal success? Easy. But there's a whole other bigger reason here why we need to be investing in the development of our emotional intelligence. This is a problem that's not going to go away unless we change. That's the real underlying motivation I have for doing the work I've been doing.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome because you're right. We have to. There are things that we have to change because we're in a lot of ways headed in the wrong directions, and and they're not easy conversations, and they're not easy changes or easy solutions.
Nope.
And but we have it in us if we choose to do it.
And we can't wait. See, we're pretty decent at dealing with chaos once it becomes chaos. But it reminds me of a saying Mark Twain said once before, a long time ago. He said, if the only way mankind can learn is through experience, I see no hope for mankind. Meaning, if the only way we can learn not to put our hand on the stove is by putting our hand on the stove, that assumes we're going to be around to learn from it. And a lot of the challenges we're facing, you don't get a do-over. You got to get it right the first time. And that requires a level of emotional intelligence, a level of wisdom that we need to be developing, all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Phil, I can't thank you enough for spending time today because it is great to get to talk to you about emotional intelligence. And I want to make sure that people, if you're listening here, reach out to Phil on LinkedIn, connect with him, check out the Master of Business Leadership. And what's your website? What's your web? Oh yeah, okay. It's on LinkedIn.
Yeah, you can take a look at my LinkedIn profile. I'm not sure, but I can. If somebody wants to chat with me, I can send you a link to my Zoom calendar, and they can pick a day and a time and jump on there.
Very good. They'll reach out to you on LinkedIn and find it. But Phil, thanks so much for stopping by and talking about emotional intelligence. I think that you can. The thing that's really nice about talking with you is I love how you can bring this down into a very complex topic into something that we can understand. And I appreciate and thank you for helping us today.
My pleasure, Damon, and thank you for the work you're doing.
I mean, with people like yourself today, this is such an interesting conversation, and I think of things in life and I see people. It's so great to be able to talk to you about it. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back again next week with another interesting guest on the Faces of Business. Like I said, reach out to Phil Johnson on LinkedIn and connect with him if you want to learn more from him. And we'll be back again. Have a great evening.